Hello and welcome to Noni, Yanga's flagship talk show where we discuss all the hot topics. Today we take a look at popular black literature such as Half a Yellow Sun, The Colour Purple and Things Fall Apart. We discuss the ways these titles broke their mould and made their way into the mainstream. Also, we are looking at Africa Writes, an event that shines a light on talented African writers in the UK. And as per usual, we're inviting you to join in with your comments and views. So if you want to get involved, drop us a line on Instagram and Twitter at Yanga_UK. Joining me today, TV writer and frequent guest of Noni, Lola Ogunbadejo, poet and Brunel International African Poetry Prize winner, Teresa Lola, and Education Programme Manager for Africa Writes, Joanna Brown. Welcome to the show, ladies. Authors such as Chinua Achebe changed Western perceptions of Africa when he wrote Things Fall Apart over 50 years ago. And more recently, there's been an increase in popularity of West African writers and poets in the UK. But is there still a long way to go? Teresa, let's come to you first. You're a multi-award winner. And if we talk about a bucket list, there's something about writing a book that appears on everybody's life appears to be kind of, you know, good in a novel, but nobody really does it. How did your kind of dreams as a child become a reality?
I'd always loved writing. So my mother kind of made it compulsory to read a book every day. And so, you know, reading stories and loving stories, I eventually wanted to write my own. And my English teacher realized I loved writing and encouraged me to go on a school trip to the Lagos Poetry Festival. I was schooling in Nigeria at the time. And when I went to the festival, I got to meet Neo Shundari and some, you know, amazing Nigerian writers. And I fell in love with poetry. And, you know, being a teenager and having a lot of things I wanted to say, you know, poetry just ended up being that mode and that.
Why poetry? What was it about poetry? Because I would presume, and most of our viewers would presume, it's shorter, so you don't get to express yourself as much, or would you disagree?
I would actually disagree, because at that time I had so many things I wanted to say, so many stories, being kind of a reclusive teenager, and I didn't want to write a novel about one thing. You know, I kind of needed tiny vehicles, you know, to kind of like burst almost to, you know, express everything I wanted to say. And poetry fitted that, you know, just kind of writing, you know, short poems, but it still carried so much weight, carried almost like the weight of a book, you know, and that was what was so beautiful about it. So I would disagree. I mean, you're able to express yourself in a short amount of time, but still as powerful.
Wow, and clearly they are, because you've been recognised so frequently. Lola, obviously our viewers are familiar with you, and mainly because of your TV appearances, not as a writer. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
As a writer, well, I mean, it all started when I was in primary school. My primary school teacher was really concerned because my writing was atrocious. It was really bad. I couldn't read it myself. And so when I was in year 6, I remember she used to keep me in during playtimes and I have to practice writing. It was really tedious and disheartening at first, and then eventually I really got into it and I enjoyed it, and I used to write all these very sort of interesting stories, and that's how I sort of fell in love with writing. And then I took that through to college, secondary school, college, and into university, and that's what even led me to study film and television studies at the University of Nottingham, because I decided that I really wanted to get into screenwriting, script writing and TV writing essentially. And that's how, but then somehow I fell into presenting and the writing took a bit of a break, but now I'm getting back into it.
You're back. Destiny never leaves you, does it?
Exactly.
Joanna, you know, what is it about, I go back to the bucket list, I don't want to dumb down the discussion, but why aren't enough of us actually doing it? You know, we say we want to do it, it's a dream and a passion, but then we feel like we can't.
So it's really interesting hearing what Lola and Teresa are saying about school, because I think it really kind of begins with our childhood and our exposure to literature. What books are we being asked to read? What poetry do we get the opportunity to read and to listen to? And I think certainly at the moment in the UK, in terms of the school curriculum, there's a real narrowing there in terms of whose stories are being told. And one of the things that we're really trying to do through the Africa Writes Festival, through the education programme, is to bring a broader range of stories into the classroom, a broader range of voices. Because then when children kind of realise that there is a whole world of possible stories out there that they can connect with, but maybe that they see themselves reflected in, that's going to give them the impetus and the motivation to tell their own story.
Definitely. I think, Teresa, you know, if you look at spoken word, it's really growing in popularity. I know there are going to be some spoken word artists at Africa Writes, but it's quite popular in America. Do you find that some artists are going into rap instead of, you know, the spoken word and instead of poetry? And I suppose you might listen to a song, you'd be like, wow, that would be great, you know, if they took out the beat, you know, slowed it down a little bit.
I actually think that both are kind of merging in a beautiful way. I mean, you have people like Chance the Rapper, for example, who would sometimes go a cappella or recite poetry on his albums. You have Kendrick Lamar as well. So I think that it's kind of like there's a gap kind of like being bridged. Why people would kind of go more for rap, I don't know, maybe the idea, I'm not quite sure. But I think that both are kind of, you know, beautifully merging, and you know, whether you take away the beat or put the beat in, I feel like spoken word is still at the heart of it. And you know, creatives will always be experimental. So, you know, you have, you know, spoken word artists who kind of go into visual arts as well and kind of experiment with that. So I think it's just creatives in general just kind of wanting to experiment, but both, I think there's a bridge kind of being, you know, kind of being closed in a way. I think it's been
they're definitely, the gap is definitely being bridged. Lola, do you think some people are put off by writing because they just don't feel like there's enough space or there's even profit or money into being a writer and an African writer in the UK? Was that something that maybe put you off?
I think, when many people think about writers, they don't necessarily think, oh, lots of money, even though, and also it depends on what you're writing about. You know, if you're in it for the money, then definitely you might be disappointed because, you know, it's a process. You write the book and then you have to take it to the publishers, and then the publishers will have to decide whether this is going to sell or not. So you might easily get discouraged. But then I was also thinking the other day, we're living in a culture where I believe not a lot of people are encouraged to sort of write lengthy pieces, so to speak. Like we've got, you know, even if you look at Twitter, we've got, you know, people are learning how to shorten things, and that was just a random thought I had. But for me, it was just challenging because my writing was so bad. I decided to keep writing on the laptop and stuff, and also for me, writing on the laptop just wasn't authentic for me. So I just kind of got discouraged from. There were many times I was discouraged myself personally from writing, and that's my own personal experience. But I think in general, many people don't see it as a lucrative career, but they are definitely wrong about that.
Joanna, do you think there's still a long way to go? Is there a loud enough voice for African writers of the entire diaspora in the UK?
So I think that actually the kind of thirst for African writing is growing and growing all the time. I think that's a market that's really kind of very, very healthy now. We're even beginning to see that in the big kind of mainstream bookshops. And Africa Writes is kind of, I feel like we've been there. This is the 7th year now actually of the festival. And it's interesting hearing what you're saying about publishing, because I think those walls have really come down. I think that maybe 20, 30 years ago, you had to go through one of perhaps very few kind of big mainstream publishing houses to get your story heard, to get your voice heard. And now we're living in an age where people can self-publish, where there are many more diverse publishing houses who are prepared to take more risks, be more experimental with the material that they're kind of showcasing. And I think the festival, what's fantastic about the festival circuit is that you can come and share ideas and build up that kind of confidence, that support. So it's very much a celebratory space for people to come and exchange ideas about contemporary writing and help each other kind of move things forward, basically. But I really feel like this is gathering momentum now. I think we're really beginning to see something.
Still to come, we ask why there aren't more African authors on the UK school syllabus, and we take a look at Africa Writes, a festival which encourages and celebrates African literature and poetry in the UK. See you after the break. Welcome back to Noni. Still to come, we discuss Africa Writes, a festival now in its 7th year. But first, let's take a look at some of the most popular African literature and the importance of these stories. Let me come to you first, Joanna. You're a Cambridge alumni, and I think most people that are up to date with what goes on in Cambridge, because it can be seen as quite elitist, not just Cambridge, but Oxbridge. And there was a huge story when one of the students said, you know, she's doing literature, but there's not enough African literature. And surprisingly, there was a backlash. But surely there isn't enough African literature in syllabuses, not just in the best universities, but right down to primary school.
Absolutely. So we're seeing a huge kind of movements across the UK, actually, from students now. The Why is My Curriculum White movement and other similar campaigns.
What was that one you mentioned?
So students are very conscious that, again, their reading lists, the texts they're being asked to read are predominantly works by white, male, possibly dead authors, and they are conscious that this really doesn't kind of reflect them, their realities. It's not reflective of literature generally. They know that there needs to be a change. So this has been a very kind of strong voice coming out from the student body over the last few years. And in Cambridge as well, Lola Olufemi was leading this movement, whereby she was looking very particularly at the reading list on offer for people studying English literature. Now, even though I think the guidelines that are set out is that the literature should be written in the English language, but that obviously then encompasses literature from across the globe. And in schools, in universities, there's still very much a tendency for the curriculum to play it very, very safe in terms of just sticking very much with white European authors. And it's encouraging to see that children and young people are speaking out about this, but we also need to know what can we do on a practical level to change this.
Of course, because as we've discussed, this is what encourages you, doesn't it? Teresa, you said you were raised in Nigeria. Yes. What's the Nigerian literature syllabus like?
Nigerian literature syllabus, we study, you know, literature from all over the world.
Wow.
You know, which is why I think it's important, especially in the UK, for African literature to not be isolated, but also included here. So, yeah, we studied Shakespeare, studied Chinua Achebe, we studied a wide range. The only thing was there weren't enough women poets, for example, in the syllabus. So that's still something that is a conversation there. But as Joanna said, I think that there definitely needs to be an inclusion of African literature in the UK syllabus, but also a broad range, because a lot of times you kind of have this tick in the box thing of just having one African poet at the back of the anthology. There needs to be, you know, there needs to be a wide range, which is why I think that the Africa Writes Festival is so important. And also the collective that I'm part of, which is also, you know, having the official opening party for the festival, so Octavia Poetry Collective, where we're all women of colour poets, but we're all very different and have very different stories. So I think collectives like ours, you know, also show that we have, you know, very different stories and very broad stories, even though we're all from Africa. We all have different backgrounds, different things to share. And so the anthologies and, you know, this UK syllabus needs to reflect that, basically.
We talk about, you know, reflection, Lola, and we talk about that a lot, of course, because we speak to many black women here. But what is it about African stories that everybody wants to, you know about, you know, and if you're an avid reader, because of course, even with Africa Writes, there are people of all colours enjoying listening to the poets and the literature that's coming out of there. But what is it about our stories that are just so captivating?
Yeah, I would definitely say a lot of people now really want to understand and get to know a bit better about the African experience. And it just goes to show how a lot of people have been perhaps misinformed about Africa. Africa is a beautiful continent. There's so much wonderful things, wonderful aspects about it. And I think now people are really curious, because at the moment, I would definitely say that Africa is on the map. I mean, it's always been there.
Africa's trending. That's a Noni term, isn't it?
Exactly. Africa's trending. And it's just it's so exciting to see this, to see that people really want to find out more about what this continent has to offer. And I think that's what is intriguing a lot of people right now.
Africa Writes is a huge festival now in its 7th year, championing African writers and poets. It brings together over 60 of the most influential voices in contemporary writing. Teresa, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Africa Writes.
So I'm part of the collective Octavia Women of Colour Collective, headed by Rachel Long, and we collaborate with the festival last year with the education programme, which Joanna will probably talk a bit more about. So Rachel and I went into a school in Camberwell, and yeah, we got to run workshops for about 5 weeks and really got to engage with the young girls there and talk about African literature. And afterwards we got to present at the British Library. So the opening of the festival, there's usually like a showcase where all the students who have been part of the education programme get to share their work. So that was the first time I got involved with Africa Rights Festival, and also I got to organise the opening party last year. I think I'm like really into parties, I guess. There's an event, a poetry event I organised that bridges the gap between poetry and hip hop, and we're the opening party for last year, called Rap Party, which I organised with In Your Elms. And this year, Octavia, got to play a bigger part in the festival, and we're the opening party this year on the 30th of June. We're having a Wakanda-themed Warriors Women event, which should be really, really fun.
I hope I'm going to be invited. Joanna, 7 years is a really long time, and I kind of consider myself an avid reader. Why have I never heard about this?
So Africa Rights, we've been growing year on year, and we're still putting the word out there, but this is now the UK's largest festival of African literature. It takes place on the last weekend of June at the British Library, so that's Friday the 29th of June next week we're starting, and over the weekend we'll be hosting a whole raft of panel discussions, performances. We have a live poetry and theatre performance from Yomi Shode on the first night, Friday night. We have the Octavia party that Teresa's spoken about, and really it's a space for open debate, discussion, people to share their poetry, to share thoughts. We have a book fair, so if people are interested in coming and finding perhaps traditional African literature, but also new and emerging, fresh writing, then Africa Rights is absolutely the place to be.
Joanna, what kind of people are you likely to see there? Because I'm presuming it's not all Africans.
Absolutely. So it's a completely inclusive space. We're open. So some of the people that come to the festival will be people who have been with us, let's say, for the last 7 years, members of the Africa Rights community. But we see more people coming year on year, perhaps with a curiosity about this kind of growing market in African literature, perhaps writers maybe wanting to pitch their work to publishers. We have publishers events. We have family events, so people can come with their children and take part in storytelling workshops. And now, over the last couple of years, we also have these new young audiences that Teresa's been talking about, whereby the school children that we've been working with in schools, in workshops, where poets have been coming in, introducing these young people to African literature, opening up this wonderful world of poetry, and also working really carefully with these young people to develop their own poetry.
And that's one of the key important factors, isn't it? Lola, Africa Rights, 7 years, regular viewers will know that you're writing a play. You've actually finished, haven't you? I'm still waiting to know what part I'm playing. But how inclusive do you think these events are for somebody like you?
I think they are very inclusive. Like, unfortunately for me, I didn't know about Africa Rights, and it's just so exciting to hear that it's in its 7th year. So congratulations for that. I remember when I was, doing some presenting back in, I think 2016, 2014, and I got this email from South Bank Centre. They were doing something, I believe, called Africatopia or something. Africa Utopia. And that was the first time in a long time that I'd been to a festival which was just celebrating all things African in an establishment like that. And it was phenomenal. We had writers, we had actors, we had singers. It was just amazing. And I felt really, really happy to see that so many people were enjoying the African experience here in the UK. And it's just phenomenal. I'm so excited about Africa Rights. I definitely will be attending and getting a lot of my writer friends and people who are not even into writing.
Yeah, we definitely, we have to encourage people to go, don't we? But,
Absolutely.
I've mentioned it, and Lola's said it, Joanna, that, we don't really know about this. How are you encouraging the younger generation to know about it, and people who may just think, I can write a rhyme, so I'm going to be a rapper or I'm going to be a singer, but showing them that there is an alternative?
Absolutely. So we're always getting the word out there on social media. You can have a look at our website, africarights.org, to see the full programme, and also to find out different ways in which you can connect with us as an organisation. I think as far as young people are concerned, again, in school, the way that the English curriculum is currently framed, sometimes there isn't really the inspiration, that kind of spark that people kind of need if they're going to write about what they want to write about. So we really are inviting young people to talk about what matters to them right right now.
Does it cost?
So Africa Writes, the education events actually are free, but the other events you can buy a ticket for the whole weekend. It's just £18, which gives you a pass to all of the events in the festival, or you can buy a ticket for one day. But we literally have, I think, over 25 events that weekend, so it really is good value.
It sounds like a really amazing experience. Teresa, tell us why it's important for you and for people like you.
I think it's important just to celebrate, you know, African literature and celebrate how broad it is, and just, do you get what I mean? Just really celebrate that, because there are a lot of other writing festivals that happen, a whole lot that celebrates everything else. And I think it's important just to have a space where you get to engage with African literature, get to celebrate it, get to, you know, meet people that you've really adored for years. For example, Yomi Sode is a writer who I really admire, and just really see them in their element and get to discover, you know, African books as well, and really buy them, and just, I think it's really about the celebration, and being in the 7th Africa Writes Festival. It's just such a huge achievement, and I'm really excited for how far it's going to go, and probably the writers that are working with the young voices, maybe years time they might even headline
They'll be the
festival.
Chimamandas, won't they?
Yeah, so it's really exciting to be a part of that, to be a part of that growth, and to be a part of future African writers who are really going to change the narrative and, you know, share their stories. And yeah.
Lola, if there was a book that you would recommend for anybody who wants to get in African literature, which one would you choose?
I would definitely say Half a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda. I mean, that is a phenomenal book, and also you can watch the film as well. And I remember when I had the privilege of interviewing her briefly on the red carpet. Wow. Yes, and I was just talking to her about the fact that she is so celebrated around the world, and just congratulating her on being a voice for Nigeria and letting the world know about Nigeria. So,
gosh, you should have invited her on, Lola. I never knew you were friends. Okay, well, that's it from me, Juliana Olayinka, and my fantastic guests, Lola Ogunbadejo, Teresa Lola, and Joanna Brown. And guess what? We're now online. Wherever you go in the world, just go to www.yankatv.com to check out all of the episodes of the show. Join me next time for more Noni Chat. Goodbye.